This is an emergency room, the place we come when we face the worst kind of physical trauma. We rely on it to be staffed and run by top professionals and funded to meet community needs. Where would we go without an emergency room? This too is an emergency room, a runaway shelter helping children and families in need of services. Also known as a Sins Fins program, this is the place where distraught families come, where runaway and throwaway children come when they face the worst kinds of personal trauma. These shelters operate 24 hours a day, every day, without charge. We rely on these shelters and their Safe Place outreach programs to be staffed and run by top professionals and funded to meet community needs. Across Florida, more than 20,000 children and their families were helped by Sins Fins programs last year alone. These aren't numbers, they are people. People like Christy.
I told my mom that I hated her. I didn't want her to be my mom anymore. I didn't want to be her daughter.
Christy was being raised by her single mom, and things were not going well.
I dropped out of high school when I was 15 years old, and I ran away a total of probably at least a dozen times, if not more. I lived with friends, I stayed in cars, I slept outside, I did a lot of drugs, I drank a lot of alcohol, I stole a lot of things, vandalized, hurt anybody that got in my way of whatever it was that I wanted to do.
Even as she was caught up in this dangerous spiral, Christy was aware that things could become much worse.
I found while I was a runaway that usually the people that are attracted to runaway kids are predators, people that do and think horrible things about kids, and the only other option is to get in with a group of kids and eventually end up in trouble, either in a detention center or jail.
The experience of Florida juvenile court judges shows that this is a very critical time when youthful rebellion collides with the juvenile justice system.
I would say very few true delinquents, kids who commit crimes and are going to continue to commit crimes, could not have been identified early on as either ungovernables, runaways, or truants. It is rare to see a child who's doing well in school and going to school, doing well at home and obeying the rules and regulations and staying home when they're supposed to, get involved in multiple criminal episodes.
Fortunately for Christy and tens of thousands of other Florida children and families each year, help is at hand. Living on the street does not have to become living behind bars.
Early intervention when children are ungovernable or runaways or are truant is so vitally important. And this early intervention in the form of non-residential counseling via Sins Fins programs or the emergency rooms for youth and families that are in crisis.
School resource officers, often the ones who first spot bad situations getting worse, frequently turn to Sins Fins programs.
When I know they're having difficulty at home with their families, and in many cases they express, Officer Norman, I don't really want to go home. So I'm faced with the choice of what to do with that child. So I know that I can always rely on the Youth Crisis Center as being a safe place.
A safe place and a place to work on solving the problems.
A child and a family, at least from my experience, that make it to the level of penetrating the Sins Fins process are not going to fix themselves. If they could have fixed themselves, they wouldn't be there.
The center provided myself and my family with free counseling and a safe place to stay. Whenever we needed them, 24 hours a day, we could call. We worked through a lot of the issues that we had and were able to learn to change our behaviors and become a more loving family environment.
Virtually every family and child that has finished the Sins Fins process, I believe, has been successful, and I rarely ever see those kids or families back in my courtroom, either as a delinquent or as a dependent.
The Youth Crisis Center definitely made me feel like they cared and that I wasn't a burden. I was the reason that they were there. They were there to try to help us, and they did.
Beyond saving families, the Sins Fins programs also save taxpayers many millions of dollars.
In this report by Florida Tax Watch recently published, if only 3 out of 20 of the youth served by the Sins Fins system are diverted from entering the juvenile justice system, the state saves more than $45 million each year.
Still, with a budget crisis looming, everything is on the table. State government must look for places to cut, including these services for children and families in crisis.
I would ask them not to, because this is the only place in this town that can help children and families that are in need that don't necessarily have a lot of money to go spend on treatment or rehab centers.
Without the Sins Fins services, I mean, obviously what's going to happen is these kids are going to end up in the delinquency or dependency court. They'll just be a lot farther gone, a lot deeper in the system, and it'll be a lot more costly.
These programs are vitally important not only to the health and well-being of children, but to the quality of life in their respective communities.
The Sins Fin systems serves over 22,000 at-risk children and their families each and every year. And the success rate for reuniting children with their families and keeping them out of the juvenile system averages 90%. That's a success rate that cannot be ignored and should not go unfunded.
See you in the morning, girls. Good night, April. Good night, Christina.
How can we turn our backs on this responsibility and such an effective solution?